Inflation doesn't feel like numbers. It feels like pressure. You don't wake up thinking about percentages. You feel it at the grocery store, at the gas pump, when that same paycheck doesn't stretch the same way. And what makes it frustrating isn't just that things cost more, it's that nobody explains it in a way that matches real life. You're told inflation is cooling or under control, but your receipt says something else. Inflation isn't just prices going up, it's your money quietly doing less. The same effort, the same hours, the same job, but less return. And that messes with people in a way that don't show up on charts because inflation doesn't hit all at once. It leaks. You notice it when you stop buying certain things, when you hesitate longer before checking out, when extra disappears from your budget. Not luxury now, just extra. And that's when it gets real. Most people were taught inflation like this: prices rise, wages follow, things balance out. That's the story. But that's not what this feels like. Wages don't rise the same way, costs didn't rise evenly, and temporarily stuck around. So now people are adjusting without calling it that. They eat out less. If they have a car, they may keep it longer. They delay plans. They put off repairs. Not because they want to, because they have to. That's inflation in real life. It's not dramatic, it's constant. And the hardest part is how quiet it is. Nobody announces it, nobody asks your permission. It just shows up everywhere at once. Groceries are the clearest example. You don't need a finance degree to notice when the cart looks the same but costs more. Same item, same brand, same routine, different total. And after a while, you stop being surprised. That's when inflation really sets in. When higher prices stop shocking you and start shaping your behavior. You plan differently. You think differently. You expect less. Not because you lowered your standards, because the math changed. Housing makes it worse. Rent goes up, mortgage rates go up, moving gets harder. So people stay put, even if the place doesn't fit anymore, even if the commute is long, even if the cost feels heavy. Inflation traps people quietly, not with chains, with trade offs. You can afford this, but not that. You can keep this, but you have to give up that. Over time, those trade offs stack, and that's where stress comes from. Not panic, pressure, a low hum in the background of everything that makes it more confusing is the message. You hear, this is normal, this happens, it'll pass, but nobody tells you how to live inside of it. They don't tell you how inflation changes relationships, how it affects decisions, how it wears people down. Because inflation isn't just economics, it's psychological. When prices rise faster than pay, people feel behind, even if they're doing the same or more work. That messes with motivation. You start asking questions you didn't ask before. What's the point of saving if it buys less later? What's the reward for being careful if careful still hurts? Why does everything feel tighter even when nothing went wrong? Those aren't lazy questions, those are rational ones. Inflation breaks the old deal. The deal where stability felt reachable if you followed the rules. Work, save, plan. When inflation hits, planning feels fragile because the future costs more than expected, and nobody likes building plans on moving ground. This is where people start blaming themselves. They think, I must be bad with money. I should be doing better. Other people seem fine. But inflation doesn't hit everyone the same. People with assets feel it differently than people with wages. People with flexibility feel it differently than people with locked in costs. That's not opinion, that's structure. And when inflation sticks around long enough, it changes culture. People stop talking about getting ahead, they talk about not falling behind. That's a big shift. It lowers the ceiling of expectation. You don't aim higher, you aim steadier. And steady starts to feel like success, which is understandable but heavy because inflation doesn't announce an end date. It just becomes the background. You get used to less margin, and margin matters more than people realize. Margin is what lets you breathe. It's what lets you take risks. It's what lets you recover from surprises. Inflation eats margin. That's why it feels personal. A broken appliance hurts more. A medical bill hits harder. A missed paycheck feels dangerous. The buffer is thinner, and when the buffer is thin, everything feels louder. That's why people are tense right now. Not angry all the time, just on edge. Because inflation turns small problems into big ones. You hear people say, just budget better. But budgeting doesn't create money, it just decides where the shortage shows up. You can't spreadsheet your way out of rising costs forever. Eventually, something gives. Time, comfort, plans. That's the real cost of inflation, not just dollars, options. People don't talk enough about how inflation changes, how long things feel. A year feels shorter when everything costs more because progress shows. Saving takes longer, goals move further away, milestones shift. That can be exhausting, and exhaustion doesn't show up in a report, but it shows up in how people live. They delay joy, they postpone rest, they tell themselves later. Later becomes a habit. Inflation also changes trust. When official numbers don't match lived experience, people disconnect. They stop listening, they stop believing, they assume the system speaks a different language. And maybe it does because inflation isn't experienced as an average, it's experienced as a bill. And bills don't care about averages, they care about timing. That's why people feel like they're working harder for less, because in a way, they are. Not because effort dropped, but because value shifted. Money isn't just a tool, it's a signal. And inflation scrambles the signal. It tells you your time is worth less, even if nothing about your work changes. That messes with identity. People take pride in being responsible. Inflation pushes responsibility first. Saving loses value. Planning feels risky. Waiting costs money. So people feel pressured to move faster or give up. Neither feels good. What makes inflation different this time is how many things it touches all at once. It touches the areas of food, housing, energy, insurance, and childcare. It's not one category, it's life. And when inflation becomes a life issue, not just a finance issue, people start rethinking everything, like the jobs, the cities, their habits, expectations. Not because they want to, but because they have to. Inflation forces change without asking. And that's why it feels unfair. Not dramatic unfair, quiet unfair. The kind where nobody did anything wrong, but everyone pays. That's hard for people to process because we're taught effort equals outcome. Inflation breaks that link. You can do the same thing and still fall back. That doesn't mean effort is useless. It means the environment matters more than we were taught. And ignoring that just makes people feel isolated. Here's the part that doesn't get said enough. Most people are handling inflation better than they think. They're adjusting, they're learning, and they're making hard choices. But handling something doesn't mean it isn't heavy. It just means you don't have choices. Inflation doesn't ask if you're ready. It just keeps going. And eventually something shifts. Either costs slow down or wages catch up or systems change. But until then, people live in the gap. And living in the gap requires patience most people were never trained for. So if things feel tighter than they should, you're not imagining it. If progress feels slower, that's real. If you're tired of doing math in your head every time you shop, that makes sense. Inflation isn't a personal failure, it's a shared condition. And recognizing that doesn't fix it, but it does something important. It stops you from blaming yourself for a pressure you didn't create. Inflation isn't just about money losing value, it's about people having to work harder to stand still. And standing still takes more energy than moving forward.